Hitting rock bottom came the day I lost my job. It took me 3 solid months just to start putting my life back together, one piece at a time. Another month went by before I figured out how to keep the family afloat without sinking us financially. And then, just when I thought I had it all under control, something I didn't expect happened. I threw myself into being a full-time dad, doing everything, laundry, school runs, you name it. The kids? They couldn't get enough of me. They love having dad around all the time. Sophia, my wife, she barely even seemed to notice. It was like none of it mattered to her. Thinking back to when we first met, I almost didn't go to that frat party. I was never into the wild scene. Keg stands and beer pong weren't really my thing. The only reason I joined the fraternity in the first place was for the networking opportunities. My GPA was sky high, but other than that, I was your typical nobody. Away from my computer, I was invisible. I'd had a few flings, nothing serious. Then Sophia Clark came along and flipped my entire world upside down. On the surface, she was just an ordinary girl, but to me, she was pure magic. I'd never been so captivated. I spent weeks just watching her from afar, almost obsessively, though harmlessly, until I finally worked up the nerve to approach her. Our first conversation wasn't anything earth-shattering, but it was enough to spark something between us. We started grabbing coffee and studying together, and before I knew it, 2 months had flown by. Then we had our first real date, and I was on cloud 9. Fast forward 15 years, and back then, I thought I was living the dream. We didn't waste any time after graduation. We got married, settled into this tiny apartment in Chicago, and battled through rush hour traffic every day. We were barely scraping by on entry-level salaries, but it didn't matter. We were happy just being together. We were an open book with each other. No secrets. We shared everything, family drama, future dreams, all of it. I was the one who handled the budget, while Sophia kept our social life alive and made sure we stayed close to our families. Life moved fast. We both landed promotions, made more friends, and finally, our savings account started looking decent. We even managed to squeeze in some travel while searching for our dream home. After 8 years, Sophia quit her job to focus on starting a family, and about a year later, our son Liam was born. 2 years after that, Olivia came along. We moved into a nice 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, got a dog, and upgraded to a family sedan and a minivan. Life was so perfectly average it felt like something out of a commercial. 2 kids, a dog, a house, and 2 cars in the driveway. I didn't think I could possibly get any happier. Then, just after Olivia's first birthday, I got promoted to manager. It felt like a long overdue reward for all those years of being overlooked at work without ever complaining. The new salary was a game changer, and the flexible schedule meant I could work from home most days, only going into the office when there were important meetings. People say money can't buy happiness, but it sure did buy me some nice clothes, better health insurance, a bigger house, and a little more confidence. I went from feeling average to slightly above average. And Sophia? The woman I already thought was stunning seemed to be glowing even more. Our life, which was already good, got even better. We traveled more, spent quality time with the kids, and saved even more for retirement. When Olivia started elementary school, Sophia decided she wanted to go back to work part-time. She quickly landed a job at a James startup, with hours that matched up perfectly with the kids' school schedule. We were able to save every penny of her salary, and I started projecting that by the time the kids graduated college, we'd be set to retire comfortably. Everything was going perfectly. Life was smooth, predictable, happy, until it wasn't. 3 months before our 15th wedding anniversary, just before my birthday, I discovered who Sophia really was. At first, I didn't think much of her wanting to dive back into work, even though it meant longer hours and me picking up the kids more often. It didn't interfere with my schedule, so I didn't mind. But slowly, I started noticing little things. Her absence became more than just extra work, and it was hard to ignore. After about 3 months, I began to notice something wasn't right with Sophia. She seemed distracted all the time, constantly zoning out. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying she was stressed, trying to find her footing at work again after so many years away. I believed her. I took on even more responsibilities around the house, thinking I could help lighten her load. I was doing everything, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, hoping that would ease her stress. But our relationship kept slipping. We talked about it once, and she said she was just feeling older, that she didn't feel the need to have as much fun anymore. For a little while, things got better. But soon enough, we were back to square one. I didn't want to start a fight, so I hesitated to bring it up again. I figured I'd just push through it. But then everything changed the day I found the gift. It was late fall, and the weather had started to cool down. I was looking for a sweater, rummaging through the closet, when I stumbled upon it. A pink box with a white ribbon, hidden behind some old shoe boxes. It was from an upscale lingerie store. My heart sank when I saw the note attached. To my beloved. My head was spinning. I didn't know if I should open it or wait. A part of me wanted to tear into it right then, but instead, I decided to wait. My birthday was just 2 days away. I thought maybe, just maybe, I was overreacting. The note inside read, "Excuse the wrapping paper. Unwrap your real gift on your birthday when I wear what's in this box for you. Love, Sophia." I spent the next 2 days trying everything I could to show her how much I cared. I met her at the door with flowers, gave her foot massages, and cooked her favorite dinners. But her reactions were cold, like she was just tolerating my efforts. She didn't seem to care at all. On my birthday, I made sure the kids finished their homework early, so we'd have time alone later. Sophia came home late and didn't even acknowledge my birthday right away. She asked what was for dinner like it was just another regular night. I suggested pizza, and the kids were all for it. At the restaurant, the waiters wished me a happy birthday, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of surprise in Sophia's eyes. It was like she had forgotten. She recovered quickly and smiled, telling me, "I'll give you your present later." The drive home was tense, almost ending in a fender bender because my mind was elsewhere. When we finally got home, putting the kids to bed felt like it took forever. Sophia had run out for milk, and by the time the kids were asleep, she still wasn't back. When I finally made it to the bedroom, I found her dressed in a flannel nightgown, no makeup, her hair in a messy ponytail. Nothing like what I was expecting. Frustrated and confused, I asked about my present. She casually slid into bed, reached for the bedside lamp, and then paused. "Oh, I almost forgot," she said, pulling a small box from the nightstand, wrapped in cartoon balloon paper. She handed it to me and said, "Happy birthday, darling," before turning off the light and falling asleep. I just sat there in shock, staring at the unopened box. I didn't even bother to unwrap it. The next day, I couldn't stop replaying the events in my mind, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. For nearly 2 weeks, I wallowed in despair, the unopened gift mocking me from the nightstand. I had always heard the saying, "The husband is the last to know." I guess I finally understood what that meant. Then, 13 days after my birthday, Sophia called to say she'd be late getting home. They were having a party at the office for Eric's 30th birthday. As she told me this, I found myself staring at the empty spot in the closet where her gift had been. The pain in my chest was unbearable, and soon after I started vomiting uncontrollably. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I was having a heart attack, and honestly, a part of me almost wished that were true. Anything to escape the crushing reality I was living in. It was Olivia who brought me back to reality, her little voice trembling as she asked, "Are you okay, Daddy?" She was on the verge of tears. I forced a smile and reassured her, telling her I just had an upset stomach and needed a minute. After that, I somehow made it out of the bathroom, grabbed an old bottle of scotch from the back of the cabinet, and drank until I passed out, waking up the next morning with a splitting headache. I didn't know when Sophia came home that night, but the next morning, she was in the kitchen with the kids, acting as if nothing had happened. Watching her sit down at the table, I noticed the slightest wince of discomfort in her face. That was the moment I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, what was really going on. I wish I could say I confronted her right then and there, but I didn't. I was too broken, too devastated. I felt like a zombie, just going through the motions while she went on pretending everything was fine. Day by day, I was falling apart, and all the while, Sophia seemed carefree, happy even. I hit rock bottom on what should have been our 15th wedding anniversary. That's when I finally decided I couldn't keep living like this. If I'm being honest with myself, I probably wouldn't have done a damn thing if it hadn't come to that. I knew I was being a coward, and I hated myself for it. My dad, if he were still alive, would have called me a wimp, and he'd be right. The fog in my head finally lifted when Sophia casually mentioned she had a work conference over our anniversary weekend. She didn't even acknowledge what day it was. That stung. It felt like she was pushing the limits of her disrespect even further. I spent that night drinking heavily, and when I woke up the next morning, I was pissed off and determined. I was done. I was going to end this joke of a marriage once and for all. I called a lawyer that morning, thinking I had finally hit my breaking point. I figured there was no way my life could get worse than this, but I was wrong. The lawyer crushed any hope I had left. Without solid proof of Sophia's cheating, and even with it, there wasn't much I could do. Legally, she'd still get half of everything, joint custody of the kids if I was lucky, and I'd probably be stuck paying alimony. She'd likely get primary custody and keep the house for the kids' sake. Here I was, my wife screwing around behind my back, and I couldn't even get justice. I felt like the biggest fool on the planet. My frustration turned into confusion, and my head spun with thoughts I couldn't organize. A few weeks passed, and Sophia, of all people, had the nerve to ask me, "You don't look well, James. Is something bothering you?" I couldn't believe her. "No, honey," I lied through my teeth. Then I lost my job. Ironically, it ended up being the best thing that could have happened. One night, while watching the news, I saw a story about a big company going under, leaving its employees without their last paychecks or pensions. That's when the idea hit me. It was reckless, sure, but by that point I didn't care. I was desperate. I'd never been much of a spender. I kept every receipt, tracked every dollar. But I decided to turn that around. I started small, withdrawing cash in bits and pieces each week, but I quickly realized I wasn't spending fast enough to make a dent. I was too good at saving, too damn responsible. So, I upped my game. First, I enrolled in an executive MBA program, $130,000. Then, I paid cash for a brand new luxury SUV, another $62,000 gone. I fully funded the kids' college savings accounts, sinking another $264,000 into that. I splurged on a completely new wardrobe and started pulling out even more cash. Twice a week, after dropping the kids off at school, I'd hit the bank, then head to the lakeshore. I even started spending time at the casino, though I never gambled. I just made sure to leave a paper trail that made it look like I was. Most of the cash, though, I stashed in a wall safe I'd hidden in the garage, a war chest for the divorce I knew was coming. I didn't stop there. I hired private investigators to tail Sophia and her lover. They gave me photos, videos, and daily reports. It was expensive, but worth every penny to gather the proof I needed. Did Sophia notice my sudden spending spree? Yeah, she noticed, but not in the way that mattered. She had to sign off on the kids' college accounts, and she saw the new car and my fresh wardrobe. But she never questioned any of it, probably assuming we were still doing fine financially. She didn't bat an eye, too busy making her own purchases, including more lingerie. I didn't bother commenting on it. We were living like polite strangers, communicating only about household logistics or the kids, while any real closeness between us was long gone. Spending time with the kids became my only real joy. I threw myself into supporting their interests, helping with homework, playing games, going to the park, riding bikes, watching movies. I even became the primary cook, getting the kids involved in making easy recipes. Sophia would show up occasionally, but she was more like a shadow passing through. I didn't go out of my way to include her, but I didn't exclude her either. If she wanted to join us, she did. We never talked about it. Every week, I get another report from the PI. Each one was a clinical breakdown of her infidelities. At first, I thought it was just her boss, Eric Mitchell, but it turned out she was juggling several men, coworkers, clients, all of them. Eric wasn't even the worst of it. Based on the grainy surveillance footage and photos, he wasn't anything special in bed. Not that it mattered. It didn't change the fact that my wife had become a stranger to me. I was living in a nightmare, but at least now I had a plan. I had proof, and when the time was right, I was going to burn her little fantasy world to the ground. Sophia's affairs weren't just limited to Mitchell. There were 6 other men, all captured by the private investigator's camera. She seemed to treat them all the same way. Nothing special, just another transaction. One of them, a client of hers, was a scrawny guy with thick glasses. He looked nerdy, but in the footage, he was rough with her, almost aggressive. I couldn't tell if she liked it or if she was just playing along. but one scene stood out more than the others. Sophia was on her knees, Mitchell standing over her with one hand resting on her shoulder, his eyes closed like he was enjoying the moment. Behind her was another man, someone I recognized from a company event, another client. The whole thing was a sordid tableau of betrayal, playing out under the harsh fluorescent lights of the office. Her expression was completely unreadable, which was somehow worse. She wasn't there. Not really. And honestly, neither was I. I felt detached, almost like I was watching a movie, not real footage of my wife's infidelity. I had already known the truth. These images were just confirmation, a final testament to the stranger she had become. The hurt I'd expected never came. It was as if that part of me had died already, numb to the pain. With all the free time I had, despite juggling my MBA classes, the kids, and my fake gambling habit, I threw myself into preparing for life after marriage. I started hitting the gym hard, lifting weights, and running more than I ever had before. I wasn't under any illusion. I knew I wasn't going to turn into some action movie star, but I was proud of the progress I made. My bench press was improving, and I could run longer without getting winded. I also threw myself into learning, spending hours every day catching up on the latest developments in my old industry. I knew I'd need a job again soon, so I got ahead of the game, learning new technologies and brushing up on the latest software. I kept an eye on CTS, my former company too. They were stagnating, no real growth, just floating along. And in tech, standing still is the same as losing. I even studied divorce extensively, especially how it impacts kids. The kids were the only reason I managed to get through my darkest days, and I knew I had to be prepared to support them through what was coming. The inevitable fallout was going to be tough, and I wanted to make sure I was ready. But 8 months into my new routine, I started to panic. Out of nowhere, Sophia started coming home on time, asking about my day, and dressing more provocatively for bed, like she was trying to revive something between us. Then, a few weeks later, she started complaining about our lack of communication and even suggested we work on our marriage. I responded with silence. I wasn't going to play her games anymore. Her attempts to reconcile dragged on for a while, right up until her birthday. I left her gift on the dining room table, wrapped in the same ridiculous cartoon balloon paper she had used for my birthday 6 months earlier. It shouldn't have been a surprise. After all, 6 months after that disastrous birthday, I finally opened her gift to me, a cheap digital watch from the impulse buy section of a convenience store. I was furious when I first saw it, but after I calmed down, I noticed they sold a matching women's model. So, I bought both, waiting a full 18 months to give Sophia hers. I wasn't around to see her reaction. I'd taken the kids out for an emergency movie night. We got home late, and by the time I woke up, she was already gone for work. From then on, things went back to the way they had been. Her staying late at the office, barely communicating with me. Then, finally, she said the words I'd been waiting to hear. I want a divorce. It took her almost a week to actually file the papers. Her demands were ridiculous: spousal support, child support, and an unequal division of assets in her favor. She even had the nerve to claim mental and emotional abuse. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I waited until the following Monday to make my move. I took the kids camping for 6 days. We left everything behind. No phones, no distractions. It was the first real break I'd had in months, and the kids? They were happy, carefree. We came back rested, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of calm. When we got home, Sophia was sitting alone in the living room, looking like hell. I could tell just by glancing at her that something was off, but I wasn't about to care. While we were camping, I filed for divorce. I hit her with everything: grounds of infidelity, the works. I asked for the house, full custody of the kids, and even spousal support, since I'd been their primary caregiver for the last couple of years and was unemployed. But that wasn't all. I filed civil suits against all 7 of her affair partners, and I went after her employer too. I didn't expect to win those, but I knew the threat of dragging them through the mud might get me some leverage. Just to drive the point home, I anonymously mailed a DVD with all the proof of her infidelities to her parents and her best friend. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't playing games. It wasn't about trying to hurt her anymore. It was about making sure everyone knew what kind of person she had become. The kids grabbed a snack and headed to their rooms without even acknowledging her. She didn't try to talk to them either. The disconnect between her and the children had grown so wide. It was like they barely recognized her. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down across from her. She refused to look at me for what felt like forever. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, barely a whisper, but I didn't care enough to make out what she said. I was too focused on enjoying my drink. "You're going to ruin me," she said a little louder, her voice shaking. I waited until she finally looked up at me, her tear-streaked face meeting my eyes. "God, I hope so," I said. I thought I'd feel something in that moment, some satisfaction, some release of anger. But when I saw the single tear roll down her cheek, I felt nothing. No rage, no sadness, not even pity. Just emptiness. "Do you hate me that much?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Oh no, Sophia. I don't hate you. Hate takes effort, and I don't waste any more effort on you. All my energy now goes into taking care of myself and the kids." "But I'm your wife," she tried to argue, her voice trembling. "Stop." I cut her off, my tone harsh and cold. "My wife was a kind, loving woman. My best friend, the mother of my children. But that woman's gone. You're just the harlot who took over her body. You mean nothing to me anymore." The silence that followed was thick and heavy, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Finally, she spoke again, her voice small and fragile, like she was crumbling from the inside. "What am I supposed to do now?" I stared at her, emotionless. "Do you really want my opinion?" I asked, not waiting for an answer. "You could move far away and start over. It's not like I'm going to allow any meaningful visitation with the kids, so leaving shouldn't be an issue. Or you could stay here, but you know how rumors spread. Maybe your future employer will hear about your little escapades. Maybe some loser who doesn't care about your past will take you in. Or..." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air before driving the knife deeper. "You could take the easy way out. If you know what I mean. But I hope you don't. I want to watch you suffer for a long time." Her face crumpled as she started to cry harder, but I didn't stop. "Then again, my opinion didn't seem to matter much when you started sleeping with half the men at your office." I had dreamed of this moment for months, imagining the deep sense of satisfaction I'd feel watching her crumble under the weight of her own actions. But as I sat there, staring at her tear-stained face, all I felt was hollow. Empty. There was no victory here, just a void. After the divorce, life was unpredictable, but the lawsuits went better than I could have imagined. I ended up with over $1 million from settlements with 3 companies whose employees had been with Sophia. My lawyer had warned me not to expect much, but we blew her company apart with discovery motions, depositions, and well-timed leaks to the media. I even sent anonymous emails to some of their biggest clients, asking, "Do you really want to be in bed with this company, figuratively speaking, when the scandal hits?" Their revenue dried up. Employees jumped ship to save their reputations. Eventually, the company went bankrupt. And Eric Mitchell? He was fired in disgrace, running out of town with his tail between his legs. The $200,000 I got from him wasn't much compared to the others, but that particular settlement was by far the most satisfying. In the end, I got what I wanted. I made sure Sophia's world crumbled just like mine had. But as much as I had fantasized about the moment, it never felt the way I thought it would. There was no sense of triumph, just a cold, empty reality. I didn't get a penny from the alienation of affection lawsuits. I knew that would be the case going in, so it wasn't a shock. Still, I took some small, twisted satisfaction in knowing that 4 of the men involved ended up getting divorced because of it. Watching their lives unravel felt like a tiny piece of justice, even if it didn't benefit me directly. The whole ugly process took a toll on me, though. The gossip and sideways looks from people who knew about my situation were relentless. But by that point, I was already so beaten down I didn't care much. I already felt like the world's biggest loser. My main concern was making sure the kids didn't get dragged through the mud along with me. They were sad and withdrawn for a while, which broke my heart. But thankfully, they bounced back faster than I expected. I counted that as my most important victory. Professionally, my biggest triumph came when CTS recruited me back, offering me the position of VP of Design and Development. I threw myself into the work. It was exactly what I needed to distract myself from the personal chaos. Within 2 years, I had developed a new add-on for CTS's software that could integrate with all of our major competitors' products. Less than a year after that, I left to start my own company and ended up selling the software outright to CTS, walking away with $11 million and a lucrative consulting contract. For a brief moment, I thought about retiring for good. I had the money, after all, but I knew I needed a reason to get up in the morning, something to keep me grounded. With the new wealth, I was able to hire Mrs. Laura Carter as a full-time housekeeper and nanny. Within a year, she moved into the apartment above the garage, becoming like a surrogate grandmother to the kids. Her presence was a godsend. She was wise, calm, and always knew just what to say. I leaned on her more than I'd ever admit, and she helped keep me on a healthier path. I adored my children, and I did my best to be a loving, involved father. But I knew I was jaded, bitter, often cold, and unkind to other adults. Mrs. Carter became my sounding board, always encouraging me to open my heart and let go of the past. As the kids grew into teenagers, I felt them start to pull away, as most do at that age. I didn't resent them for it. In fact, I thought it was probably for the best. The last thing they needed was to get too close to the bitterness that still festered inside me. Mrs. Carter stayed with us until the kids went off to college. When she retired, I made sure she had a generous pension, and I offered to let her stay in the garage apartment rent-free for as long as she wanted. She had been with us for 15 years, and throughout that time, she was always urging me to open my heart again, to find someone to share my life with. But I never did. She passed away knowing I hadn't taken her advice. No one ever got close to me after the divorce. I kept my friendships superficial. My romantic relationships? Non-existent. Sure, I went to a few awkward group dinners, but nothing beyond that. Over time, I gained a reputation as a cold, ruthless bastard, and I didn't blame people for keeping their distance. In a way, I encouraged it. The money gave me access to high-end call girls, and I made use of them regularly. Most of the time, I didn't even bother sleeping with them. I just talked to them for an hour, then send them on their way. There was one girl I saw more often than the others, a pretty young woman who went by Tina. I later found out her real name was Jessica. For a while, she seemed different, easy to talk to. But when she started getting too attached, I cut her off without hesitation. That's how it was for me. No one got close. No one stayed. Sophia, unsurprisingly, didn't fare much better in the years after our divorce. For almost a year, she tried desperately to reconcile with me or rebuild a relationship with the kids. I had warned her how things would go, but she didn't listen. She stayed in Chicago, and I made sure her reputation followed her. Her sordid history became well known among prospective employers, and I didn't lift a finger to stop it. If anything, I made sure the right people knew exactly who they were dealing with. When Sophia started dating again, I made sure her new boyfriends knew exactly what kind of woman she was. I sent each of them a little informational package, full of details about her past indiscretions. If I had to face the consequences of her actions, then so did she. The calls, emails, and even letters kept coming from her, all begging for some form of communication, some form of closure. She wanted forgiveness, or at the very least, acknowledgement. But I couldn't care less. Some dark part of me wanted her to keep suffering. I never went to therapy or counseling. What good would it have done by then? I could have changed my phone number, blocked her emails, or had my assistant screen the mail. But I didn't. I let it all come through, and each apology or plea only hardened me more. Eventually, I sent Sophia one last gift. I had lingerie from her favorite store wrapped in their signature box with that familiar white satin ribbon. I even included a handwritten note, addressed simply to the cow. The note itself was less polite. Go fuck yourself. Though my wording was far cruder than that. I figured she'd get the message. One of her would-be suitors, some poor fool, decided he'd confront me about the harassment. The guy showed up at my door one night, reeking of booze, and shoved me to the ground. That was his mistake. I'd never been in a fight in my life, no combat training, nothing, but I had 2 years' worth of rage bottled up inside, aimed at her and every man she'd cheated with. This guy became the unfortunate target for all of it. I walked away with a bump on my head and a cracked rib, but he didn't fare nearly as well. He was lucky to survive. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and trespassing, got off with probation. But the surgeries and rehab, those would stay with him a lot longer. After that, Sophia stopped trying to reach me. I stopped caring about where she was or what she was doing about a year later. After my private investigator reported that she'd found work cleaning hotel rooms in some rundown, rural town in Virginia. She'd become a ghost, a distant memory that didn't haunt me anymore. I saw her one last time, 16 years later, at our daughter's wedding. I knew the kids had reconnected with her sometime after college. I didn't try to stop them. She was still their mother, after all, even if she had destroyed our lives. Time had been unkind to her. She'd gained weight. Her skin was wrinkled and lined, and she had that worn-out look of someone who'd been smoking too long. To me, she looked old and broken, a shadow of the woman I once loved so deeply. And yet, in her eyes, I could still see traces of the person she used to be. But I felt nothing. She sat quietly at the back of the church, alone, only interacting with our daughter briefly. She made no attempt to approach me, and we kept a careful distance from each other, at least 30 feet apart the whole time, like an unspoken agreement. As the reception wound down, I saw her outside, waiting for a cab. I noticed the thin gold band on her left hand, a pitiful little diamond chip in the center. It made me smile for the first time in a long while. Maybe, just maybe, she had ended up worse off than me after all. I walked over to where she stood, looked at the ring, and then met her gaze. The sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. Deep, raw regret. "By the way, you ruined my life," she said quietly, her voice breaking just a little. I glanced down at her left hand again, then back up at her tired face. "I'm glad you found someone," I replied, my voice cold. "I hope he makes you happy." And with that, I turned and walked away, heading straight to my waiting car. "Good evening, Mr. Clark. I trust you had a pleasant time," my driver, Henry, asked as I climbed into the back seat. "It went as well as could be expected, Henry," I replied, settling in. "Let's just head back to the house. I think I'd like to be alone tonight." "Of course, sir," Henry said, smoothly pulling the car away from the curb. As we drove off, I stared out the window, feeling the emptiness wash over me again. No triumph, no sense of victory, just the hollow comfort of knowing it was all finally over.